The reason I don't record as much is because so many of these stories are weak as fuck. But in the interest of intimacy, I figure I might as well read them and then be real with you regarding whether or not I feel like it's good or bad. So, let's begin. Story 1. Identical Skin. My twin sister Mallory and I are completely indistinguishable, right down to our overly sensitive Irish skin. The only visual difference is a small burn on Mal's forearm from overexposure to the sun. We used to be really close, but ever since Mal started dating Sam, she's been spending less time with me. But 2 weeks ago, Sam came over when Mallory wasn't home. I was about to tell him she was at Jessica's for an overnight cram session, but he kissed me before I got the chance. He thought I was my sister. Then he started talking. "Molly isn't here, is she?" he asked me, looking around. Obviously, I was there, not Mal. I was wearing long sleeves, and he wasn't looking for the burn anyway. But I'd never been kissed before, and he was good at it. So I played along. "No, we're alone," I smiled my sister's best smile. "Good. I know you've been fed up with her lately. It's good that you're not spending so much time with her anymore." Fed up? I knew I was becoming a third wheel with them, but then Sam's mouth met mine, harder this time. I find myself swept up in the urgency of his kisses. I realized in that moment that I wanted everything Mal had. I was fed up as well. I was sick of coming in second place in the eyes of the other half of my soul. The next morning, Mallory came home looking especially tired, complaining of a headache. "You look like you've been working really hard," I said sympathetically. "It's Sunday. You should rest and let all that material sink in." "You're right," she agreed, looking thoughtful. "Maybe I'll go lay out on the beach for 20 minutes to relax." "That sounds like a great idea. Here, you should use a spray-on sunscreen, SPF 120, for our delicate skin." I handed her the bottle and 2 tablets. "Here, take these aspirin too, for your headache." She looked at me strangely, eyes flashing guilt and turning grateful quickly. "Thank you so much. I'm gonna have my earphones in, okay? I'll be in our usual spot if you need me, but I'll be back in half an hour max." "Right. If you're not, I'll come looking." She'd once stayed in the sun too long, and the small portion of her arm outside of the umbrella had burned. I helped her get coated in a thick layer of the spray-on sunscreen and made sure she took the pills before she left. I followed and watched her fall asleep. It was a sunny day, and my forearm stung where I'd smudged some spray. I grabbed the umbrella and toted it back to the house, and around sundown, I heard footsteps. I greeted Sam, who glanced at my burnt arm and asked where Molly was. "No idea," I said, kissing him and pushing the cooking oil under the table with my foot. So there's that story. I like that the sleeping pills were left to our imagination, as opposed to the writer going, "And then I kicked the sleeping pills under the table as well." Fucking. The second story is extremely short, and it's entitled Homewrecker. I dumped the remainder of the toxic powder into the drink and watched it slowly dissolve into the liquid. Getting right to business here, huh? I smiled to myself as I thought of how one of my biggest problems would soon be gone. I'd been kind enough to welcome her into my home when she had no other place to go. Instead of showing thanks, she betrayed me. Did she honestly think I'd let her take away the only man I ever loved? She honestly thought she could steal my husband. I didn't want to believe he had feelings for her, but now I was certain. I've seen the way they look at each other, and after he promised me I was the only one he'd ever love, he walked into the room and smiled at me. "Is that for Allie?" he asked, pointing at the drink. I nodded and extended it out towards him. "Awesome, thanks, honey," he said, kissing me on the forehead and taking it from my hands. I smiled as I watched my husband take the bottle into the nursery and feed it to my infant daughter. Wait. Oh, wait, so the baby's the, the home wrecker. I get it. Because he loves her and they love you. I see the way they look at each other. What a fucking psycho. I mean, I guess the scary part there is that shit is probably happening right now. There is some lady that's like fucking psycho enough to be jealous of a father's love for the baby. So, yeah, pretty spooky. Here's another one. The Gray in Girl. I found a girl while I was out driving my truck. She was lying on the side of a dirt road with her sundress hiked up. Wait, those two lines rhymed. Sorry, I'm continuing. I screeched to a halt and pulled over. Her breath was shallow. I tried calling 911, but there was no cell service this far away from town. She wheezed something, maybe a word. I put my ear down to her mouth and heard her choke out, "In me." Her mouth opened again, but her breathing stopped. She didn't say anything else. I ran back to the truck to grab the emergency medical kit, like I had any idea what the hell I was doing. When I turned back around, she was standing. Her yellow sundress was on the ground around her feet, and she was naked. Her mouth gaped open, like she was screaming, but her eyes were closed. Not even closed tight, closed like she was sleeping. Her mouth opened wider and wider, and I heard some pops and crackles, like her jaw was breaking. Her eyes were still closed, so peacefully. I stared and thought about approaching her until gray vomit started pouring out of her mouth. The whole area was dead quiet aside from the splashing when it hit the ground. No bird sounds, no insects. Her eyelids didn't move. I backed away towards the truck, fumbling in my short pockets for my keys. Her chin was practically at her sternum. The skin of her cheek started to tear. The popping sound had disappeared. I guess her jaw was completely separated. The gray liquid flooded out of the wreckage of her mouth and pooled in the mud around her bare feet. My ass hit the bed of the pickup truck and I backed into it. I stood there and watched from about 40 feet away. Her neck extended. Just her neck. It pushed upwards from her shoulders, her spine somehow elongating. The gray fluid splashed harder on the ground as it fell from a greater height. She was easily 20 feet tall at that point, all neck, still growing. Her eyes remained closed with a beatific calm. Then, from what I assume was the weight of her top part exceeding that of the bottom, she fell towards me. The gray liquid arced through the air, drenching the ground between us. She scrambled on her hands and knees trying to right herself as her head grounded into the dirt. She grabbed two small thin trees and pulled herself into a standing position, her head and neck slowly raising back upright. I jumped in my truck and tore out of there. I kept one eye in my rearview mirror the whole way down the straight, narrow road, watching in horror as the outline of her head rose over the tree line. It was only after I was far enough away from her and she was out of my sight that I looked down and noticed the gray liquid clinging to my ankles. That's the end of that one. Leaves just enough to the imagination. I'll probably read more of these, but later.